created fulfillment.
Yes. Okay, here we go. So everyone, by the way, no shame if you don't have your purposeful goals assessment in front of you, or if you're new, and I think most people do, as I look at your faces, this is where we're going. So if you have it in front of you, you don't have to do this, but if you have it in front of you, I'd like you to take a look and open up your feedback report. And as you know, these things read like an amazing chapter of your life in this area of purpose. And if you look on page 4, there is a diagram, little radar graph that has 6 areas of your life. Okay, work, family, spiritual, health, financial, and then personal, which is kind of our catch-all. So it's this category that some of you have different ways you think about what personal looks like. So it's another category. Here's what I want to ask you to put in the chat real quickly. The question is this: what would change if in each of those areas you had a clearly articulated purpose? What would change if and this is, it's going kind of global, if in each of these areas, work, family, spiritual, health, financial, and personal, what would change if you had a clearly articulated purpose? And Daniel, will you give me some insight into what comes up there?
Yeah, I got from tomorrow, what would change? Perhaps more momentum. Tiffany says everything would change. Wanda, purpose would be more balanced. GR, work, quote unquote, would catch up to all the others, which are pretty even. Eva, increased energy as all parts move forward together. It's good.
Interesting.
Russ, being more intentional, not taking quote unquote time off from purpose. Tim, super dependent. I have a clear purpose in some areas, not so much in others. JD, confidence and mentoring. Dick, interesting to see how things have changed as I've looked at each of these areas through the lens of my overall purpose, thanks to WiLD and the goals. It's great. Joanne would say connected to what matters most in each of those areas.
Okay, keep them coming. Amazing. It's amazing to hear those things. So let me go forward with this. So one of the things I think is interesting, and one thing that's been wonderful about this season in my own life is that I've had, I feel this responsibility for the literature and the science behind the things that we do in the toolkit always. But also know that what's been so fun about this is to not have to talk through all that and to just make it pretty practical. And there's always this tension between what we call validity and like rigor and the science behind something, and then utility, like how do you actually use it? So I'm kind of going to go straight with the how do you use it, and you guys, if you all can just trust me that there's good science behind this. So here we go. So think about this for just a second. When we were kids, and if you had a brother or a sister or a good friend, and your brother or sister or your friend hits you, all right? I don't know if any of you had a sibling who hit you once. My sister was 8 years older, and she hit me a couple. Like, doesn't seem fair, but it was fair. Believe me, I had other kinds of ways that I hit her, and so with my words. But so she smacks me, and then I say to my parents, they say like, "What'd you do?" This didn't happen. I'm using a bad example. My sister actually was not this culpable, but if I had someone else, you can imagine like my kids would do this, and the parents say, "What did you do?" to the one who actually was the one they caught doing the slapping, and then the kid goes, "It was an accident," right? And then they go to you, and they say like, and they look at you. And what do you say to that? It was an accident. He did it on purpose. All right? I think it's interesting. Like as kids, we know what we're talking about. There's something about, what does that mean? He did it on purpose. It's very, very interesting. So I want to just get us into this purpose and make this very practical. I hope as we think about this. And last week, we talked about when we were getting, this is where, and you all know this, that the WiLD Toolkit is this whole perspective. So there's there is all kinds of information, as you stay in this conversation, related to self-efficacy, the development of efficacy and agency. There's goal setting, all that literature on that, and go back and watch, Daniel's talk on goal setting. It's a part of this purposeful goals assessment. There's two pieces of this, that you have the purpose in these different areas of your life, and then you have the goals or the actions that you have set. And as you also have heard, this is the one tool in the toolkit that pulls data from another place in the toolkit, which is from the goal setting tool. So it does pick out your last 3 goals. And so if some of your graphs are blank, I think many of you know this, that you didn't miss the mark. It's just because you haven't used the goal setting tool, which is over on that left target symbol. If you click on that, you can set goals and set moments that matter. But let's go right at this thing about purpose, okay? And I'm going to give you a little formula. Now, those of you that may have a math background, give me a break right now, because you're going to be like, yeah, well, there should be more in your formula. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. But just kind of every metaphor runs out, every formula runs out at some point. But here it is. Here's what purpose is not. Purpose does not equal default. Okay? When we talk about this often, that we're trying to move away from default. That's what intentional in WiLD stands for. So default means to do nothing. We say this all the time. It's like when we default on a loan, what that really means is you didn't pay. You did nothing, and so you defaulted. So to default means to do nothing. There's no intentional action. Nothing happens other than you, or you can think of it as you move toward your compulsions. What I want to give you is a way to think about the purposes in these different areas of life in the PGA, the Purposeful Goals Assessment. By the way, I got to tell you, I mean this. This is not me giving a pitch. This is me giving a pitch for something. This is probably the one assessment. This is like, taking shots at your other children by saying it's your favorite. But I will tell you that this one had a very salient impact on my life. And so in many ways, I authored something when we created this toolkit to kind of help me out, because I struggle with this. And so I'll tell you why in just a second. But here's what purpose does equal. It's a bunch of D words because I like alliteration. Okay? We're going to talk about this. Desire, design, determination, and direction. Desire, design, determination, and direction. And this is where the math comes in. I put them in as multiplicative. It's the product of all these things. And I'll tell you what these things mean. And then I'm going to add something to the formula that I think is very, very important, especially for WiLD leaders. And I mean for all of us. These people are entering into the great outdoors of what it means to be intentional about our development and also leverage the research that's out there. So desire is this. And here's the thing. What I'd love for you to do is to pick one area. Pick one page in your toolkit that's somewhere between page 6 and 11, I believe. I'm gonna use 2 examples. One is family and one is work. Okay, and I probably urge you to pick one of them, and then I want you to put it through this lens of these 4 Ds. Okay, so desire, very quickly. This is basically like we just dipped our toes into the shallow end. Desire is like, so what do you want? I think part of purpose is kind of asking yourself, what do you want? So that's the first level we're going to get into. The second level is what I call design, which I think of that as not only how you are designed, but also the architecture of your life. So it includes lots of other things, okay, that need to be considered as you think about what purpose looks like. So just considering the architecture of your life. And this is where it's so cool, because it's bespoke to you. It is customized to you because you have a certain architecture, you have certain strengths, but you also have certain support networks, you have certain structures, you have a certain financial situation, you have all these different pieces need to be a part of it. So that's the design part. That's that architecture. The third thing, let me look back at my list here, is determination. Do you know what the definition of determination is? I love this. Conscious resolve. Like, this is more than what I want. This is being aware of how I'm going to go after it. Conscious resolve. Okay. And then the last one is direction. Is kind of, this is where it starts to get closer to the ground of goal setting. It's like, which way are you going to go? What choices do you have, and which way are you going to go? So let me give you Let me say this. I'm going to say the last part of the formula now. Here's where purpose gets so interesting. From a WiLD leader's perspective, we don't believe that you're the only person in your world that matters. Okay. So if you don't like that, then you're probably on the wrong Zoom call right now. So this idea that we purpose is not just our purpose, it's related to other people in our sphere who matter to us. Most of whom we're aware, but some of whom may not even be aware, but those are hard to have conscious resolve about the folks we don't know yet. So like, for example, my purpose I'm going to describe to you relates to my wife, and it relates to my children. So, and it relates to the WiLD Leaders team. These are people, it relates to some of you who are like, I actually have to consider it because you're close enough in my sphere that it matters. And so let me but most specifically, I would say to my wife, because I grew up in a family where, and this is part of the design of my whole life, I grew up in a family where my parents were very, very intentional about them protecting their relationship before their relationship to us as children. And some of you may have a problem with that. My folks were like, Rob, if it comes down to you, my mom would tell me this, to you or your dad, it's going to be your dad every time. And so it was very clear that it started there. And there's actually some interesting psychology and attachment theory around how powerful that is for a kid, even though it sounds harsh. Because in the back of my mind, I'm going like, they are unshakable together. You know what I mean? So there was interesting security that was built in that, even though it was kind of like, really, I don't matter? That's part of it. But anyway, but it translated into my own reality, thinking like that is something that's a part of a value system of mine. It's a part of my design. You get that? Like if some of you grew up in a different system, you may not feel it quite the same way, but it's a part of it. So for me, realizing that purpose is connected to my wife. So let me give you one example that I hope gives you some handholds. And this is the conversation I would love for you to dig into with one area, and then with hopefully the possibility of going to others. So let me give you this. I want to talk about my finances I'm going to open the door a little bit. I'm not going to tell you what my finances are, but I'm going to tell you about some area of purpose for me a few years back related to this assessment. My desire. It's kind of a surface level response, but I want to be financially intentional and responsible. Not that interesting, but I kind of want that. And I will tell you also, I'm not that good at it. So as a young person, I wasn't. I married a woman who is very good at that, who grew up in a system where my wife had a budget down to every penny when we got married. So we had to deal with this thing early on in our marriage. So, but I want that, but I'm not really at the conscious resolve point. Then I looked and I think about the design part. I do not naturally think about debt reduction. This is something I thought through when I was thinking about my purpose in this area, in this tool. Like I was like, I grew up in a family where debt was okay sometimes. But my wife grew up in a family where debt was kind of something you tried to avoid. Are you with me? I'm like it's like there's this reality, right? I know that I'm better when I have more margin. So I don't need a lot of margin, but I need some. And I know that I think even our marriage functions better when we have a little bit of margin. So it's not like, so that was important. I am designed to create value in the marketplace. Like it's one thing I've had to I love creating value that in the marketplace that will help people and organizations. So this is all these kinds of things. There's a broader story in my WiLD story about that. These are some of the things in my design part. And also I thought about our stage of life. So I wasn't getting started. I wasn't a student. I was at a point in my life where I could do this. And here's the other thing. When I did this time, not this time, but a few years back, interest rates were low. And I didn't know if they would ever go lower. So all that to say, then the determination part, here's the thing, the conscious resolve. I like my house, I'm probably not moving. I like my wife. I like where our relationship is right now. I respect her financial acumen, even though we can fight about it sometimes. I want what we want. This is me getting into more of this, bringing these things consciously that I hadn't thought about before. I like security financially. Even though sometimes I'm okay without it, I'm adaptable and I can take some risks, but I also do, like I said, the margin helps. And it helps me to take risks in other ways for the sake of people like you. You know what I mean? Like there was some of that. So then the direction was, here were some of the possibilities. Stay the same with our current financing on our home. I'm not kidding you. This is where the PGA took me. Refinance or sell our house. That were some of the possibilities, to stay where it was or refinance. There were probably other options as well. This is what this caused me to do. this caused me to refinance my home. And I can't tell you, this was probably 8 years ago in the first iteration of this tool when I was using it, where that happened. I could tell you the same story about my health. I could tell you the same story about my work right now. I documented things, but for the sake of time, I want you to go there. But I wanted to give you a pathway to think about this purpose. And now look at your purpose in the area you picked. So can you look at it? You picked one of those pages. And if you don't like it, that's okay. The point of this is like to think about, so what do you want? What is the design of your life in that area of your life? What do you, when you get a little bit more gritty, what do you determine? What is that conscious resolve when you raise some of those things into your consciousness? And then finally, here's some pathways. What are you going to choose? Which starts to get closer to now to what goals would you set in that area? I wrote, by the way, if you don't like your answer, it's okay. I print mine out and I write a bunch of stuff on the bottom of it and I put it in a box and I keep it. So, or you can put it in the moments that matter as well. But my hope is that what you will do together is look at that statement of purpose and say, is it there yet? Is it to the point where you're like, that could change my life? You know what I mean? Why are you, gets to your, why are you functioning in that space of your life right now? And so I hope that may be helpful in giving you some sort of easy handholds for how to think about this purpose together.
So we're going to get into a conversation